Let's go. And here we are huddling. And it's not because we're cold. We're just trying to protect the microphone from the wind.
We love each other.
Yeah, we love each other. Valentine's Day was last week. Anyway, g'day everyone. Welcome to week number 4 here on our 2025 Chronological Bible-in-a-Year Reading Challenge. It is a mouthful, but I'm getting it out every single week. Last week, we read through 21 chapters of Genesis, looking at the story of the 4 generations of the patriarchs leading up to Joseph. And I thought, what a great opportunity to bring Jaye along,
Hi.
the wife of my youth, for this tutorial, because I've got to say Joseph is probably one of your favourite stories. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just
The favourite.
just because she imagines the coat of many colours, probably. Anyway, I wanted to bring special guests on from time to time, as you know, just to get an idea of how you guys are tracking with your readings at home. So I've got a couple of questions for you, Jaye.
Okay.
Same ones I asked Jessie the other week. Firstly is, how are you doing your readings?
Mm-hmm.
And this last week, what would be your main takeaway from those Genesis readings?
Ooh, okay. I'm definitely doing my readings with my paperback Bible in bed in the morning with a cup of coffee before I go for a walk, so that I can walk and think about.
And who makes
what
you
I've
your
been
coffee,
reading.
darling?
My beautiful hubby. Good job.
Paper Bible.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And Genesis, I'm just loving the flow of the stories. They're so easy to read, such interesting characters and lots of like symbolism, which is my thing. So really, really love reading through this week's.
Family dynamics, easy to read family, bit of love stories and prophetic symbolism and colours.
And quite a bit of craziness.
Yes, I can see that all being right up your alley.
Yeah.
And what in these chapters of Genesis, reading through the patriarchs and Joseph, is there one thing that's really got your attention or got you curious or you've done more research on, or that kind of thing?
Yeah, so again, I've gone into a deep dive on the coats. So, of course, it starts off with Joseph's coat of many colours. His dad gave it to him, but then watching how it threads throughout the story. So he ends up in a pit and they put blood on his coat and they tear it up and like, that's it, coat's gone out the door. But Joseph still, you know, what was in that coat, his identity, his priesthood, the prophetic calling on his life, it didn't get thrown away with his coat. In fact, it just got a restoration when he stepped into Potiphar's house. And all of a sudden we see that in Potiphar's house, he's got this new high status again after a period of time. And then it gets stolen again. Like, that's pretty full on.
Potiphar's wife rips it off him.
Yeah.
So he literally, every stage of Joseph's life, he gets reclothed, like he gets a new piece of clothing.
Absolutely. And then, you know, okay, this is the best part of the story for me at the moment, is he ends up in prison. And I love the story because it's got a cupbearer and a baker. So it's got the wine and the bread, okay? More symbolism that we see flowing throughout the Bible. But not only that, he actually, he interprets a dream and the cupbearer says, "I'm going to remember you." Not the only time in the scriptures that a cupbearer is the one that points somebody to having availability to get into a kingdom, like think Nehemiah as well. But he says, "I'm going to remember you," and then forgets him for 2 years. And then after 2 years, there's all of a sudden a change around. He gets pulled out of prison, beard shaven off, and he gets recloaked. And not only that, he's like second to the king. And it just reminded me that, you know, no matter who tries to steal our clothing or our identity or the giftings that God's given us, they are always there, even in the pit, even in the prison, and they can be restored like that to something so much more. So not to put aside those hard times, but actually to go, it's God's opportunity to grow us in an area where one day we might sit next to a king.
There you go.
Yeah.
So some big life lessons learned from the story of Joseph. There is a reason that Joseph's story is beloved by many people and has impacted many people, and we're most certainly going to see that as we continue on with the Joseph story this week. Thank you for joining us, darling.
Hey, thank you.
Well, let's get straight into our tutorial. Well, this week, last week, of course, we witnessed, as I just said, the 4 generations of the patriarchs. But this week, we're going to finish the Joseph story. We're going to see the entire family of Jacob relocate to Egypt because of the famine. Jacob, or Israel as his name is going to prophesy over his kids before he dies. We're going to jump ahead 400 years and then get into the story of the Exodus. Exodus, all right? So it is a massive week. It is an action-packed week of readings, and I loved it. I've got to be a bit ahead of you, of course, in the reading so I can do these videos, but I absolutely loved it, and I'm sure you're going to read it too. And particularly just reading straight from Genesis into Exodus, you're going to see they read very similarly, and the story just flows on quite nicely. All right, so this week, basically, if you want to schedule, I think the readings fit really nicely into 4 sittings of about 20 minutes each, all right? The first, so 2 for Genesis and 2 as we begin Exodus. In Genesis 42 to 45, we have these 4 chapters basically center around the story of Joseph and his brothers. The brothers literally come and they bow to Joseph. They don't recognize him at first, okay, but then he reveals himself to them. And of course, this becomes one of the big but God stories of all time. You know, what you intended to harm, but God intended it for the good. And it actually got me thinking, back in 2022, in the year that we handed over the leadership of Bayside Church in Victor Harbor, I preached a message. We launched a preaching series that year called But God, and this was the very first sermon. I think I might launch that on YouTube this week. Really, really great message on the Joseph story. But of course, more than that, a great story of family and being reunited and forgiveness and all that. It is again another story of Genesis revealing prophetic patterns, okay? So again, we see the older brothers persecuting the younger, the favored son. They rejected him, they hurt him, but now they're reconciled back to him, because despite them rejecting him, he is blessed by God. He is used by God to fight others, to bless others. And of course, this is the whole message, that you can't fight covenant. You can't thwart God's purposes. And ultimately, this picture of Joseph is seen in somebody later on called Jesus, okay? Where the Jesus brothers, the Jewish people, reject him. The tribes, as it were, reject Jesus. And then, because they don't recognize who he is at first, he reveals himself to them. Forgiveness flows. And like Jacob and Esau, this story ends with a beautiful picture of forgiveness, etc., etc. So again, a great story there as those 4 chapters, Genesis 42 to 45. The final 4 chapters of Genesis, 45 to 50, or 47, 46, 47, 8 and 50, we have the focus goes back onto Jacob, or Israel, as the father figure. And there's basically 2 things I want you to notice as Jacob, in his old age, prepares for death, all right? The first thing he does is he establishes the 13 tribal heads, the 13 tribes of Israel. And what he does is he prophesies over their future. Now, you might think, Chad, I thought there was only 12 tribes of Israel. What are you doing talking about 13? Well, here you go. Basically, Jacob, as you know, has 12 sons, Joseph and Benjamin, the 2 younger ones. So let's say 12 sons. Well, what he does is he takes this favorite son, Joseph. He takes him out of the picture, so to speak, and he gives his portion of the inheritance to 2 of his sons. All right? So the one son, Joseph, becomes 2, Ephraim and Manasseh. And this is basically what's known as the double portion for the firstborn son. Now, he's not the firstborn chronologically, he's the favored younger son that gets the firstborn blessings, a double portion. So put it this way, I'm a father of 4 kids. If I was to follow the firstborn principle, I'd take my eldest son, let's say Jesse, and I would give him double the portion, 2 portions of the other kids. So rather than dividing up my inheritance into 25%, I'd give Jesse a double portion, divide up into 20% blocks, and Jesse would get double. He'd get 40%, the others would get 20. All right, that's called a double portion of what the other kids get. Well, that's what Jacob is doing with Joseph. He's got 12 boys. He's taking Joseph away, let's say, okay? And he's giving him a double portion by blessing his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and adopting those 2 sons. So now there are 13 tribes of Israel. As we move forward, there's no such thing as the tribe of Joseph. Okay, it's the tribe of Manasseh and Ephraim, and of course, guess what? When Jacob prays for those 2 boys, he blesses the younger one over the older. Just how the pattern is working. Okay, but the point of what I'm saying is this: catch this. There are now 13 established tribal heads as we walk into the Exodus story. 13 tribes of Israel, not 12. Just keep your eye on that. And the other thing as he does before he dies, as I said, is he prophesies over each of the 12 sons, and that prophecy prophecy is very poetic, like a lot of prophecy is. It is rich with metaphor. He says Judah is a lion, okay? Issachar is a donkey. Dan is a snake. Naphtali is a doe, a deer, a female deer. And Joseph is a vine who's been attacked by archers. Now, you and I both know Joseph is not a vine, and never in the Joseph story do we see him being attacked literally by archers, okay? He's attacked by his brothers. He is attacked by Potiphar's wife, okay? But this is metaphor. This is poetic, prophetic language. Get used to it, because as the prophets continue all throughout the Bible, they're going to use metaphor like this. We see it first here in Genesis. Yes, Genesis is a book of history, but it is a book rich with prophetic patterns and themes and poetic language that we are to get used to as we go. We know this. Dreams are interpreted poetically. What does 7 fat cows mean? Well, it means 7 years. Of course, everyone knows that. What does the sun, moon, and stars mean when they bow down to you? Well, everybody knows sun, moon, and stars refers to Jacob and his wife and the boys. It refers to people. The sun, moon, and stars are pictures of the leaders of Israel. Okay, so this is prophetic language starting to come through. I especially want you to notice that as Jacob prays for his boys. And also notice, it really got my attention this week, that of all the sons outside of Joseph, the son that he gives the most attention to is Judah, okay, the lion Judah. And he says, Judah, the day is coming where your brothers will bow to you. They've just bowed to Joseph, but now your brothers are going to bow to you. They are going to obey you. In fact, the nations are going to obey you, and the scepter of government will not leave you, Judah, which is really fascinating. So here is Israel in his latter days, prophesying leadership over Judah, which brings us to the book of Exodus, where a great leader is ordained by God, and he's not from the tribe of Judah. No, this one is from the tribe of Levi, okay, which sort of gives us a hint that one day a Judean leader is coming, all right? Hint, hint, we've got to wait for that. Here we come to the book of Exodus with the Moses story, okay? He's the youngest born of his parents. Miriam and Aaron are his oldest siblings. And here again in the book of Exodus, there's 2 main sittings I'd like you to consider doing these readings in. The first is the first 6 chapters, where we see Moses' origin story up until the time him and his big brother Aaron confront Pharaoh, okay? And then the other chapters, chapters 7 to 14, are the 10 plagues, the Passover, and the crossing of the Red Sea. And that's basically where we're finishing our readings there this week in chapter 14. So 2 main things I want you to notice, or at least I noticed, put it that way, in the book of Exodus this week. Number 1, yet again, keep your eye out for recurring patterns and themes. There's a reason I've been saying all the way through the book of Genesis. It establishes patterns and themes that continue on. Well, lo and behold, we see the same things happening here in the book of Exodus. We see baby Moses rescued from judgment. How is Moses rescued from judgment? He's placed into an ark, okay, a basket by his mum. Guess what? The same word for basket. If you click on that word in your Bible program, it's exactly the same word as ark, the ark that Noah built, okay, to save his family. Moses was saved by being put on the water in an ark. Remarkable. Moses is exiled to a foreign land for 40 years where he serves as a shepherd. He gets married. Then he comes back after encountering God, and he comes back and is reconciled to his family. We have seen that story before in the book of Genesis. God appears to Moses. He reveals his name. He says, I've remembered my covenant. I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he provides a lamb. Well, we've seen these things before. Even in the crossing of the Red Sea. This is amazing. As our readings close out this week, we see a potential, let's just say, throwback to the 7-day creation story of Genesis 1. Do you remember in Genesis 1, in day 1, God separates light from dark? Not the sun yet. The sun's got nothing to do with it. He separates light from dark. Well, as God's people begin to cross the Red Sea, what's the first thing God does? He separates darkness, Egypt, from light, his people. And he puts a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire, and he separates light from darkness. What's the very next thing that happens in the creation story? Water is separated with a big vault in between. That's exactly what we see in the crossing of the Red Sea, as the waters congeal and a big vault is in between that God's people can cross through. But they can't just cross through it on their own. No. Land needs to appear. Well, that's the third thing that happens in the creation story, isn't it? The land appears out of the waters. It's exactly what happens in the crossing of the Red Sea. Land land appears. God's people, living, seed-bearing people, walk across that land. And as they walk into the next week's readings, as we come to Mount Sinai, he gives them the sun, moon, and stars to establish their worship system, animals that they can sacrifice to him, clean and unclean. There it is. It's God distinguishing. This is the whole creation language coming out in the Exodus story. It's just profound. Anyway, I really nerded out on that this week, so pay attention to that. And lastly, the thing that really got my attention this week is paying attention to the language of distinction. Okay, just like I said then in the creation story, Genesis chapter 1, God separated light from dark, separated water from water, separated water from land. He's making a distinction. God is ordering his creation by separating and by making distinctions. So in the Exodus story, okay, God distinguishes his people from the Egyptians. He calls them out of darkness where they were formless and void, okay, and he forms them into one nation under God and fills them as a new nation at Mount Sinai, as we'll get into next week. All right, so there's heaps I could say there, but basically at the end of the day, God is saying, I have heard the cry of my people. I am the God of covenant, the God of your fathers, Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. I've heard you. You are my people. I am your God. And what makes this group of people so special? What makes this Semitic slave group of people that have been in slavery 400 years? That's all they've ever known. All they've ever known is slavery. What makes them so special? Their pedigree. God has made a covenant with their forefathers, and he is remembering and honoring that covenant. I will be their God. They will be my people. That is the grand story that sets up the Exodus. It's a beautiful story, and it plays itself out over and over and over again through the biblical narrative. So make sure you pay attention this week. All right, I hope that's enough to go on. I'm going to go have a quick dip before I head back home, and I'll see you guys next week for week 5. Enjoy your readings this week, and don't forget to interact in our social groups on Facebook and WhatsApp. And yeah, we'll catch you next week. Bye.